Hey everyone, so this is a video on this campaign promise actually, and what I think of it, where Pierre's promised $5,000 TFSA top up for investments in Canadian companies. So what this is really about is you get an additional $5,000 each year on top of your regular TFSA contribution room, only if you invest in Canadian companies. So that additional 5,000 can only put into Canada. So initially it sounded pretty good on paper, like, oh wow, additional TFSA room. Yeah, it has some stipulation, but whatever. It's better than not having it at all. That was my thought. But after some digging, I don't think it is a wise policy at a government level. But more important than that, it's it can be a little misleading to people, and people might actually lower their future expected returns, which is perhaps the more sad part of it. Because I want to see people do well financially, and this is a little bit of that one of those tricks where you might actually do less well financially because of this policy. And I'll get into that why. So now that we know what the policy and why as well. He said he wants to bring home billions of dollars of investments and jobs to Canada while bringing home savings for you. And this is also another one of those tricks. Like, I don't think you should invest in anything because it brings home billions of dollars of investments and or jobs to Canada. I don't think you should treat that as greatness. Like I'll give you an example. Nvidia stock had a massive run up, and maybe not this year. This year, stocks are taking a beating, but they did not grow their company just because their valuation got outsized 3 times. In fact, they're having troubles keeping people. People are actually retiring from Nvidia because they've made so much in their equity plan that they don't need to work anymore for the rest of their lives. So just because you invest in the stock market or the valuation of a company goes up doesn't mean that you're creating jobs. That's insidious right there. That is very misleading. And the other side is, and this article actually touches on it. I don't even need to research this myself, but I had a hunch where only 1.5 million in 2022 maximized their contributions that year. So the way this is written, let's see if I can find it here. Number of average who maximized contributions. I think, okay, so it's not just that year. It looks like it's a bit unclear. I'll take them at their word and say, like, maybe it's 1.5 million people who maximized their TFSA entirely, right? I don't think that is based on this language, but let's even go that far and say 1.5 million people. That's about 3 to 4% of people who have maximized it, and those are the only people that this policy even applies to. Because what's the point if you're not even maximizing your existing room? What's the point of adding more room? It's meaningless to you. It's absolutely meaningless, right? So okay, and this article does, I think, somewhere along the lines talk about, oh, I don't even know, where it only applies to the wealthiest and all this stuff. And yeah, to a degree, yeah, 3 to 4% of people are maximizing it. Let's say, yeah, it's only to the wealthiest, and it is a good policy in general. The TFSA is fantastic. Like, Stephen Harper is the goat for that in recent history for doing that. FHSA tops this for sure in terms of my personal love for not for registered accounts, but this is absolutely up there. And now this is the other part where I want to touch on, which is why I think this has a risk of lowering your future expected returns, because everybody loves to save on tax. Like, people generally, unless you're some extreme left wing radical lunatic, right, that yeah, we gotta pay more taxes, we want big government. You want less taxes generally while still maintaining some level. You want the bare minimum taxes you can get away with, such that education and healthcare are funded, and your roads are safe, right? You don't want more than that, as much as possible. And so in the spirit of that, I did some analysis to try and see. Let's see if I can pull it up. It's right here. Let's do some analysis work where I was comparing investing in a Canadian TFSA with Canadian stuff to the United States. And what does that look like? So I picked this particular ETF for Canada to represent Canada. It had a pretty good diversified portfolio. It was 60 companies, the largest established Canadian companies. It had a total return of about 8.8%, 10 years. I don't take inception figures because they can vary based on what equity you're comparing, because this means from 1999. So another ETF could have started in, I don't know, like 2020, when, like, right then, and then it can have a crazy 5-year return, or it can have a crazy inception return, I should say. So you can't compare that to this, but you can compare, if they both have a 10-year return, you can compare those two. Okay, last 10 years. It's the same timeline. So I picked this to represent Canada, and then I picked this one, the S&P 500, the gold standard of indices, to represent the U.S. from a Canadian's perspective. And I picked the CAD hedged version, even though I don't invest in this, because this is actually, in my opinion, it's like, it might as well say nerfed, because they basically charge a little more fees, and your expected return will be a little bit lower because they're protecting you against currency fluctuation. So if the Canadian currency goes, just a bit of an aside, if it goes down relative to the US dollar, because it's hedged, this price won't go up, even though Canadian dollar is weaker now. But the reverse is true too. So if the Canadian dollar appreciates, this price won't go down either. So it sort of tries to fix it at one nominal exchange rate. And so that costs money. That has a drag on your return. As you can see, if you compare this 10-year return, 11.42%, to the actual S&P 500 listed in US dollars on the US exchange, it was 13%. So it had a drag. And if you compare it to what I'm investing in, which is here, it's 14%. Well, that's because the Canadian dollar depreciated a little bit. So either way, that's the aside. I just picked the CAD hedge, the nerfed version of investing in America, so to speak, over the last 10 years. So that being said, I did a bit of a comparison here. So I said, okay, here's Canada, 8.8%, putting in $5,000 a year, and I'm going to go through it this way. So this whole section is one section, that whole section is another section, and this third section. They only vary in terms of number of years to invest, really. So 40, 10, 25. So if you look here, 40 years, $5,000 a year, you put in 200 grand, made 1.5 million, total account value 1.75 million, roughly 1.74, 0 taxes paid. Here, this column is not realistic. I just put it as an absolute worst case from a tax perspective, where you're paying your marginal tax rate, not marginal, your average tax rate, every single year. And that's not true when it comes to investing in ETFs like this, equity-based ETFs, where first of all, nobody's selling off annually. Nobody's saying, okay, at the end of this year, I'm going to sell off my whole holdings and realize all of my gains. Second of all, even if you did, you would never be at 28%. You would be capped out at 25%, and that would be that's because of the capital inclusion rate. On average, you're probably at 14%, because 28% is what you're paying on a 100K salary. 14% is what you would pay on 100K of capital gains, because of the 50% inclusion rule, roughly. So this is an unrealistic scenario. Tax advice, tax aside, this would never happen. But even if it did, yes, this came out on top even with a lower rate. But in reality, you're looking at something like perhaps here, because this one is if you're paying off tax annually, which is, even though it's a realistic tax rate, it's not a realistic idea where people are selling it off, like I just said. So even in that case, you're way ahead investing in the US compared to Canada over the last 10 years. And the break-even point is somewhere at that 24% mark, where this starts coming out on top. But if you were to sell at the very end, you just kept holding, you don't realize any gains, you are well ahead. 40 years of investing, it's about somebody's working life. You come out well on top. That is like a good amount of money, even 40 years from now. It's not inflation adjusted, but neither of these numbers are inflation adjusted, so they're comparable. You could have been tricked into investing here, but the reality is you could have been there. And so that's the insidious, or I should say the trick part, where you think you're coming out, oh yeah, I'm not paying any taxes on this, but even a few percentage points uplift in your expected return can drastically change your total account value, even though on one you paid like so much tax, and here you paid nothing, because this difference, especially with the years to invest, where the 40 years, has by far a bigger impact than your taxes. And so I did, okay, what happens if you just went for 10 years? You don't want to do this whole retirement strategy, which in my opinion is the most effective way of using TFSA as a retirement account, is to use it as for just 10 years. Maybe you're trying to boost your house down payment, so 10 years seems like a reasonable amount there. And it's about the same. So in that case, yeah, maybe there's some value in 10 years. It's about the same. Yes, if you ignore this unrealistic case, you are still technically even ahead with the US in this 10-year mark. But again, Canada has outperformed the US for years at a time. So it could be that this is way ahead because you don't even pay the tax and your rate is higher. So here it's a bit of a wash. Using this as a retirement strategy, definitely not a wash. And here is that 25-year mark. So this is somewhere in the middle there. You are one-time sell at the end versus doing something that will never happen versus something that even it can happen, but most people don't. You're still ahead. You're still ahead. So in most cases here, you are ahead. You're actually ahead in all of these cases except for this column, which will never actually happen, which is the absolute worst case. And in some cases, you're actually very competitive. Here, not really, but you get the idea. So it's still better. The point is not investing in the US is better. There are times, like I said, in Canada where we have outperformed the United States. The point is you should not get caught up in trying to look at this figure, the taxes figure, and say, yes, that's why I'll invest, because the taxes are more beneficial. You should look at what my total return will be, regardless of the tax. So that's basically what I wanted to get at. I think I have a few more notes that I was taking here, and yeah, so that's why I don't really how to phrase it, not really a fan of this account. But if you had to use this account, this is what I would do. This account is still beneficial. I mean, don't get me wrong. Even though I can make this analysis and say, oh yeah, just invest in something that will yield higher. Not necessarily true that it will yield higher. All I know is I'm definitely not paying taxes. So this is a more surefire way of getting some returns tax-free. But if you were to, I think the most effective way of using a Canadian TFSA is to invest it in something that yields income, like not something that yields capital gains or dividend income, because Canadian eligible dividends, I should say, are anyway taxed at a favorable rate. So you shouldn't probably bother with using a CTFSA for that. You should, or capital gains, because that's half off anyway. And that's why you're seeing all these like very competitive figures, because of the fact that your tax rate is extremely low, or it's deferred, a one-time 25%. It's deferred, right? You can defer it, you can take it at half off and deferred is here. So that's a big reason why it's not as effective. And so that's why the way you would make this most competitive is to invest in income yielding. And there's one that comes to my mind, and I was looking into this, something like this, where if you put it into the VRE, which is it's a rate, so it's all real estate income trust. I think that's what it stands for. But it's real estate. It's an ETF, so it's multiple different classes of real estate in here. And really, this stuff, all these graphs aside, it yields income. And I'll show you why I'm saying that. I'm not just making it up. Here, distribution history. Not even here. Here, this is what I'm looking for, the annual distributions. If you look at it, just look at 2024. Your eligible dividends this year, so this is like favorably taxed. This is not why you would put it here, but 14.6 cents for the year. But here, other income and foreign income, 60 cents. Look at, if you combine these two, that's what, like 74 cents out of the total 94 cents was straight up taxed at your marginal tax rate if it wasn't in one of these TFSA or whatever, right? And same with, if you look back through the years, you're going to see that 2023 was a lot of capital gains. It was a bit of an outlier, I think. But here, 2022, $1.17 plus that. So over half was sort of taxed at that marginal rate. So if you're trying to create income generation, something that optimizes income, whether it's income, foreign income, whatever, into the CTFSA, and you want to diversify your investments, it's a great account for that. And one thing I will be looking for is, how does the rollover effect work? Because that is another use case for this, where let's say, what I mean by that is, how do you accumulate room? Like, is it a use it or a lose it? Because that can have an effect. Let's say, and why I'm saying that is, let's say you invest in the US here, and you're this guy. You have 2.6 million. But now you're in retirement. You don't want to chase capital gains. It's maybe a little risky. You want to put it into more of a stabler income yielding stuff, maybe something like a rate ETF, because you want income now. You don't want capital gains. You don't want to deal with the volatility. Could you have, let's say, keep this, but because you never used the 5,000 into 40, the $200,000 of room, could you have taken 200,000 of this and now dumped it into your Canadian TFSA? And I don't have an answer for that. I don't think he has talked about it. I don't even think he's given much thought to this policy. Again, and the reason for that is, it affects such little Canadians. He's misleading people into saying it's a job creating thing, when it's really not. Investing in the US is not me creating jobs for them. It's mostly flowing to the rich. I just happen to benefit because the rich benefit and the rich always win in the end. It's a rigged system, if you ask me. So just can't beat it, just join it. So it doesn't help boosting jobs, in my opinion. And even if it did, it only affects 3 to 4% of Canadians, and the best case scenario. So you're looking at 3 to 4%. Was at 1.5 million multiplied by 5,000. It's what, 7.5 billion, I would say, rough off a napkin math of Canadian investment from Canadian people. But yeah, that's basically my thoughts on this whole top up thing. It has a niche use case. Maybe it has another one where at the very end you can dump it in instead of over time as well. So yeah, see you around.